Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Eng Lang Pro's YouTube channel. We're here to help you guys get the absolute maximum you can out of English language, the VCE subject. My name is Tori, and today I'm going to be covering some of the very basics. So if you're here going into year 10 or 11 English language, this is a great place to start at Metalanguage. So English language, it's a wonderful, amazing subject. There are some difficult topics to get through at the very, very start, and then it gets even more exciting and even better than it already is with Metalanguage. But you do kind of have to, put your nose to the grindstone for the first 6 weeks or so, really get the Metalanguage down. And then after that, you have the basic skills in linguistics to be able to describe language, which is what we're trying to teach you here. So we call it Metalanguage. It's language specific to linguistics, the field of linguistics. And we have 6 to 7-ish subsystems, we call it. So each subsystem focuses on a different aspect of how language is formed. And we're going to be starting at the very, very smallest, which is sound production and sound production in language. So the smallest unit of a sound is a phone or phoneme. And today we're going to be discussing phonetics and phonology, which it's a little confusing because they are technically two different subsystems, but they're lumped together in the VCE study design, mainly because phonetics is very, very briefly covered, mostly year 11, and then we much more focus on the more broad ideas surrounding English language as a whole, and phonetics is about sound production only, so it really doesn't have that much to do with specifically Australian English, which is what VCE English Language is about. But today I'm going to be teaching you both of those. So phonetics and phonology is going to be the first subsystem that we cover, and I'm really excited to get into it because, yeah, like I said, this is the really grit work of English language. Once you've got this down, and for those of you in year 10, year 11, it comes up a lot again in year 12. It's absolutely necessary. It's vital that you know your meta language inside and out to do well on your final exam. So better start early. Let's get into phonetics and phonology. So let's start with a definition. Phonetics is the study and classification of the speech sounds occurring in language. Phonology studies the way in which the speakers of a particular language systematically use a selection of these speech sounds to express meaning. This is the definition from the study design. So it doesn't get more official than this, but I can break it down a little bit further for you guys to make it a little bit more clear. So phonetics is actually how is the sound made. So with that, we talk about things like airflow, different obstruction that we can make with the different mechanics of our mouth and lips and tongue, and how we can then create language. We can create sound, different sounds, based on actual mechanics and physics. So this is really, really complicated, and I do think in year 11 you'll probably go into it a little bit more in detail than year 12, but it's also super, super interesting. It warrants an entire study of its own. It's a little bit of anatomical knowledge involved as well, things like knowing the different areas in the mouth and the tongue and the jaw, different Latin names, for example, which I'll cover very, very briefly. It's not as necessary to know in year 12, so we won't spend too much time focusing on that. Phonology, however, is how this sound then functions as part of our language. So for us, that's Australian English. It's subdivisions, ethnolects, things like that. We can talk a little bit about American English as well. Really any language that's relevant to Australian contemporary Australian society, which is all of them. But yeah, so phonology is about how we use the mechanics of our mouth, the physics of airflow and obstructions with different mechanics of our mouth, to then form things like lexemes, which are words, and then further sentences, and then even further into entire discourse. Yeah, super, super interesting stuff. Let's get into the actual nitty-gritty of the study design. This is what is mentioned in the study design, which hopefully you guys have had a look. If you haven't, please do have a look, download it on the pages website, the VCAR pages for English language, and look at the meta-language pages. They very helpfully have ticked what's relevant for which unit. So 1, 2 being year 11, speech sound production, like I said, very much phonetics, more phonetics than phonology. That's only relevant in unit 1, whereas everything else is relevant in in year 12 at some point. So, very briefly, let's go over speech sound production. So, what they've listed here is consonants, including voicing, place of articulation, manner of articulation. So, voicing is just about whether your larynx vibrates when you speak. So, for example, and thankfully, I've got here a little bit of it's a little bit of a basic IPA chart, which we'll get into in a second, but they've got, as you can see, two symbols in some of these places of articulation, which I'll also get to in a second. One of them is voiced and one of them is unvoiced. So if, for example, you put two fingers right here where your Adam's apple is and say p, b, you can tell that there's a little bit more vibration in your larynx here with b than p. Or even better, labiodental f or v. V is voiced, f is unvoiced. Here you've got th, which is unvoiced, or the, which is voiced. S, z is probably the best one, actually. I should have gotten you guys to do the fricative alveolar ones first. But actually, now that we're here, I've got a beautiful table here. So as you can see, along the top, we've got place of articulation on the x-axis, and we've got manner of articulation on the y-axis. And phonemes is the consonants that we're talking about. So phonemes being sound. In place of articulation, place means where in the mouth, and manner is about how the actual sound is produced. So let me explain that a little further. Place of articulation, bilabial, again, going back to, I think, Latin. Bilabial, bi means two, labial means lips. So there's two lips involved in this, p and b. Labiodental, meaning lip and teeth, f and v. Teeth and lips both involved. Dental, it's just teeth involved. Alveolar is the ridge just behind your teeth. So t, d, you can feel where your tongue goes for those. Palatal, so this is talking about your palate. And velar is at the back of the throat, k, g. And glottal is even further back, talking about the glottis. In terms of manner of articulation, a stop means there's a complete obstruction of airflow at some point. So for bilabial, your two lips are going to stop the airflow. Fricatives are sounds that are made with narrow channel of airflow, creating friction. Fricatives, friction. Affricates are sounds that start with a stop and then end as fricatives. So if we take the stop t or d and then add the fricative j, here. Adding this symbol, which is the j sound. This is the g sound. This is the j sound. So d, j, as in judge. That's a fricative plus a stop plus a fricative, which makes an affricate. You guys don't need to know this inside and out. Please do not stress about this. See, I'm not super fully versed with this either. So don't stress. You don't need it for either year 11 or year 12. You just need an awareness of place of articulation and manner of articulation, and a little bit more in year 11. Year 12, like you need only an awareness that this exists. That's it. Then you've got nasal, which just means there's going to be airflow through the nose, and a glide, so there's much less obstruction. So yeah. There's no obstruction. Those ones will be followed by a vowel and there's no friction created. Don't stress. That's absolutely all you need to know for year 11 and way, way more than you need to know for year 12. So what you need to know in year 12 is an awareness of the IPA. So you need to know that there's something called the International Phonetic Alphabet, which I showed you. This is kind of a simplified version, but you can have a look here. This one is for vowels, and you can have a look. I highly recommend seeing what the different sounds of the vowels are. And this is the second part of the production of sounds in the study design, which is place of vowels. So they said something like backness, I think. So here they say vowels, height, backness, and roundedness. So really all you need to do is have a look at the IPA chart, see what they mean by literally just position in the mouth. And I highly recommend for you guys to just say each of these sounds and feel how wide open is my mouth and where in the mouth is my sound coming from. So this is called the schwa. This will become important in a little bit, but it's the most central vowel. And it's very important in particularly Australian English. Google the Great Vowel Shift. So that's speech sound production. You don't need to know it in year 12. You need to know it for unit 1 only, and that's all you really need to know is have an understanding that we classify sounds in phonetics based on how they're produced in the mouth. Then we've got connected speech processes, which are very, very, very relevant in year 12 as well. I've left you guys a bit more notes as well. This will be available down below. Have a read. This is a bit of an explanation for things like the IPA as well. So, connected speech processes, or actually, I better explain one more thing. In terms of the transcription of English, I said that you don't need to know the IPA for year 12, and that's true. But if you really want to show your knowledge, you can bring in a little bit of IPA to use in your essay or your AC, particularly your essay. And I would recommend doing that because it really shows you're able to understand things like accents, which are very phonological. So they're about how sound is produced. It's not about different words that are being used, for example. So have a listen to this video of Steve Irwin. So happening right now. That's a diphthong, meaning two different vowel sounds together. Instead of the more upper right, it's right. And that's very much characteristic of a broad Australian accent. So this is something that you could talk about in your year 12 essays. So think about how we might use IPA to describe this. And the way we might use that is to have a look. They say here, the transcription of English using the IPA as described by Harrington, Cox, and Evans in 1997. And let's have a look at how they described it. So this is the different vowel sounds. And here we're going to take from Harrington, Cox, and Evans, 1997, we're going to draw out what Steve Irwin just said. So he said right, and what's great is that they give some words that we can say to then match up the sound. So I would go await, that's not quite, wait, no, white, no, about, boat, Boyd, toyed, and ploy. I would say right was alongside this one, and using the Harrington, Cox, and Evans 1997 way of writing it, we're going to copy this and describe it like this, using two dashes, forward slashes. And that's how you describe it in your essay, and that would really make you stand out as a really, really high scoring student who knows their stuff. Now, moving on to connected speech processes. So this is how when we speak, not when we are writing or signing, how we combine different sounds to make things easier to say. The function of these connected speech processes is to make things easier to say. You might hear along your journeys that Australians have been called kind of lazy in how they talk because of our very central vowels, stuff like that, our connected speech processes. But really, it's about efficiency. It's about us making sure we don't have to move our lips and tongue as much, because why bother if you can still understand? That's the point of language, right? So an example is assimilation. And there are 4 that you need to know in your studies. Assimilation. Yes, that looks right. And assimilation, when I told you guys about place and manner of articulation, assimilation is just moving or changing one sound in a word to another that's closer in place or manner of articulation. And a classic example of this is, would you rather say handbag or handbag? And if you think about it, hand, bag, you need to move from an alveolar position, that's the ridge behind your teeth, for d, to b, bilabial. But if you say handbag, you're already in the bilabial position. And so that makes it a lot easier and quicker to say because you don't need to move your lips as much. That's assimilation. Handbag. Number 2, vowel reduction. Actually, let me do it in order. Oh yes, good, I am. Vowel reduction is when we reduce a vowel sound to the center of our mouth. And if you remember, I mentioned just before, that's this sound. The schwa sound. So, for example, instead of saying the, we say the, and that's a schwa. And I would have to copy it over. I should do that. It's my schwa. Here it is. Await, attempt, arrive. As in the. That's vowel reduction. And then you've got elision, which is basically deleting a sound from a word to make it easier to say. So what's a good example of that? Let me think. Yes, February. February. Or library is a great example. Instead of library, library. Elision, insertion is the opposite. So inserting a word like, for example, axe, to ask something, someone something, instead of ask. Or especially. That's another good one we have in our books, especially. So sometimes it's easier to add in a sound, maybe to help with the transition. Very, very stereotypically, it can be kind of described as associated with lower socioeconomic status or education, but you need to take the context of your text take that in very carefully for you to justify that. So those are your connected speech processes. Moving on to prosodic features. So this is in sound. How can we say the exact same word? So things like volume, tempo, pitch, intonation, emphasis. And I think those are the 5 that they've pitch, stress. Oh yeah, instead of emphasis, stress. Pitch, stress, volume, tempo, intonation. So 1, pitch, stress, volume. Pitch, stress, volume, tempo, intonation. Intonation. So pitch is basically how high or low in sound wave frequencies. You don't need to know the physics of it, but consider high pitch versus low pitch. What does it indicate? So, for instance, really high pitch talking really fast often is associated with excitement. Maybe very low pitch is someone's a bit down, depressed, that's bad news, something like that. And that's how we're going to take this meta language and then use it to analyze things. We're going to consider, what does this indicate about either the speaker or the situation that the speaker is in? Stress, so emphasis, pretty self-explanatory. Why are they emphasizing certain words? Volume, so how loud or soft someone is. Again, pretty self-explanatory as long as you know the context. Tempo, how fast or slow. And all of these will be written in your transcript in a key at the very top. So fast or slow is written with an A or L respectively. For allegro or lento, let me just confirm that. Yes, I was right. So allegro meaning fast, lento meaning slow, if you guys know music theory. And intonation is basically about the change in pitch. Or sometimes, for example, a full stop could be recognized as a final intonation. But in general, we have things like rising or falling intonation, which talks about when you go up at the end of a sentence or end of an utterance or phrase, or down at the end of an utterance or phrase. And this is super interesting to analyze in terms of floor sharing and holding, but that's another topic. So it's indicated as a slash going up or going down, which yes, I've got over here. Cool. So in general, if you've got falling intonation at the end of a sentence, it means you're finished talking. But if you've got rising intonation, you've got more to say. See how you thought I had more to say? It's because I had rising intonation at the end. And finally, phonological patterning, which I've talked about in my patterning video, so go check that out. But basically, this is something that is being introduced into language in order to have some sort of memorable effect, usually. And there are a few listed in the study design, including alliteration, assonance, consonance, onomatopoeia, rhythm, and rhyme. Alliteration, assonance, consonance, onomatopoeia, rhythm, and rhyme. So quite difficult to analyze and pretty rare that they come up. But alliteration is when each word starts with the same sound. Assonance is when each word has a vowel sound, not necessarily at the start, which is the same. So, for example, I, whine, and try to cry. Consonants is the same thing, but with a consonant and not a vowel. Onomatopoeia is when we are describing the sound. So, for example, buzz is the sound that a bee makes that we're trying to describe. So those are the specific words. Rhythm is about the cadence of the phrase. So, for example, like I think it was Shakespeare's iambic pentameter. You don't need to know about that. You just need to be able to pick up, oh, this has 5 syllables and then 5 syllables, 5 syllables. This is a rhythm. Or the A sentence A and B rhyme and C and D rhyme. And that together with rhyme is also a rhythm. And think about, does this make this text more memorable? Does it make it more interesting? Does it help conjure up an image for the reader or the listener? So that's phonological patterning. But again, go check out my video on patterning for more on that. So yeah, that is a whiz through the first subsystem of both phonetics and phonology. Please don't stress about things like phonetics in year 12. You don't need to know it. Lucky you. If you're going into year 10, year 11, have a look because it's worth it. It's worth it to have a little bit of a look in your own mouth in terms of anatomy, like having a look what's going on in there with your teeth, your soft palate, glossus, which is between your vocal folds, I think. But again, don't spend all your time stressing about that. However, connected speech processes, prosodic features, and phonological patterning, those are the ones worth knowing inside and out for year 12. IPA, you just need to know it exists, and you need to be able to recognize the transcription of spoken texts, but they give you a key at the top of every spoken text in the exam anyway. With that, I hope this has been very helpful for you guys. Super fun journey to start on English language. Know your metalanguage. If you're coming back for final revision, good luck for your exams. This will be helpful. Know especially connected speech processes, prosodic features, phonological patterning. You need to know those. IPA, have an awareness that it exists. That's really all. And speech sound production, leave that for past you in year 11 or you guys in year 10 and 11 to really get to know well. All right. And with that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.